Okay, excellent. All right, so I'm sharing my screen. Okay, so please let me know if you can see my screen. Can you see my screen, please?
We can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm going to be discussing with us how to write the discussion section of our manuscript. So this is assuming that you have already gotten some results, you've analyzed your results. Now you're at the point you are writing up your report, you've written the introduction, the method section, you've presented your results. Now you want to discuss your results. So this is what I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes. So I'll say if you have any question at any point in time, just probably just hold on and note it down. So at the end of the day, I'm going to we'll take all the questions. So my plan is to show you the component, generally how to, some tips on how to write, and then also expose you to like the component of a discussion section and general tips on how to write the discussion section, and that includes the limitation, which are most of the time part of the discussion section of the manuscript. So I believe that Tom might have mentioned this to you, so let me just emphasize it. When you write your manuscript, you want to aim to be clear and concise and focus on, so that you not be veering off and going off topic. You don't want to be unnecessarily complex. Try to use like heavy words. What you are trying to achieve is for people to understand you, not to sound smart. So you be careful not to, in the bit to sound smart, start using big vocabulary. So it's better if you start from very simple vocabularies and make your point known, so you can get across to your reader. Try to also, I mean, that doesn't mean that you should now start introducing informal words and introducing pidgin and all of that into whatever you are saying. So you want to be formal and professional. So ensure that everything that you're writing has like a clear logical flow. So, the sections, the paragraphs are kind of continuous, and they are joined with one another, though they are linked. And, every time you make a statement that is categorical, in a way you want to support it with literature. So, and that's something that you will have done before you even start writing. You've done enough literature review, and I show you guys how to do some literature review before. And the other thing that will also guide your writing is if, like the journals, they have a particular formatting guideline. For instance, if there is a way they want the citations, in-text citations and references to be, you want to follow that when as you're writing as well. So let's move to the discussion proper. Now, you see, the aim of the discussion section of your manuscript is to give thoughts. Context is to add your thoughts to your results. So you want to interpret your results. So we already stated them in the result section. So it's not like you're going to now start stating them again. So you want to compare your findings with existing literature that you've done some literature review. So you want to put your work side by side with other works that have been done. And what does this imply? Now that you've found this evidence, what does this mean? What could have been the cause of this, and what does this mean? And you also want to situate your work within the body of knowledge that is available. And, so it's you just kind of like giving your thoughts and, gathering thoughts from other literature and adding it to your results. So that's what the discussion section is about. So Generally, the component of a discussion section include an area where you discuss your findings, and then an area where you state the limitations of your work itself, and then you conclude. So sometimes some works you need to have recommendation, some you might not need to have recommendations for the future. But usually the discussion sections of a paper might include, sometimes they are separate, but many times they're actually together. So discussion of your findings, limitation, and conclusion, they might be together under a single heading called discussion, or they might be separate. So that is what I'm going to kind of take you through today. So how do you write the discussion section of a manuscript? First, remember that you have you have your findings in the results section. I mean, as a general rule, I would say bring out the main findings. You want to bring out the main findings from your result that you're going to write on. You cannot discuss all your results. You most likely will not be able to discuss all your results. So what you want to do is you want to bring out like the main findings from your results that you are going to discuss. So remember that sleep, that's, I think, effect of, somebody was talking about effect of, is it caffeine intake and all of that. So in among medical students, if you find out that caffeine intake, it affects academic performance, that's something to write. If you find out that it is worse in females, that's something to, maybe that's something you want to note. If you find out that it is affecting the particular class the most, maybe that's something you want to note. So all of that. So you bring out your major findings and you decide the ones that you want to discuss. And what you will discuss will also be guided by the literature that you've reviewed, that you've done before. Usually, I would say limit the major points that you want to discuss in your findings, in your discussion, to between 3 to 5. Don't do more than that, really. Because by the time you are going over 5, your discussion is becoming so lengthy and people might not be able to keep up. So I'll say limit, bring out like 3 to 5 major findings from your results that you want to discuss. So how do you do it? Generally, so I will show you like a paper at the end. So generally, you want to start with like a brief summary of the key findings, not restating your results, but you kind of giving overview of what are like the catchy main findings from your results. So you want to give a general overview, and you now start picking all these issues one by one. So you have, so that's the initial paragraph. It might be, the first paragraph might be like you introducing us to what you want to discuss. So these are my main findings and I'm going to discuss them. That might be your initial paragraph, or you can just dive right in to start discussing the issues one by one. So now when you pick the first issue, the first result that is kind of prominent to you, you compare this with literature. What has been done within your context, what has been done regionally, what has been done globally. How does what you have found compare with that? So you do that. You also elaborate on the significance of what you found. So what does this mean? Why is this so? If you say that it is affecting the females more, so why? Oh, what does that mean? What does this mean for what could be the likely cause? So you are trying to really find, so you, from your literature research, you are going into literature to see, why is it that women are more likely to be they are more predisposed to being affected by caffeine? Are there literature that have established that before? Is your result actually proving that? You also now want to discuss the implication. So what does this mean? For instance, so does this mean that now this will affect the academic performance, or does this mean that we are going to have less female graduating with good grade, something like that? So now, if there's any work that has been done that shows that women have like lower grade and all of this like that. You are situating your work within that context that could this be because of this? So, putting that together. And so you see step 1, 2, 3, compare, elaborate, discuss implication. So you finish for the first point, you move to the second, you move to the third, if you have a fourth and fifth, you do the same. So for each of the results that you want to discuss, for each of the points that you want to discuss, you want to compare with literature, elaborate on what this means, the significance, and what's the implication of this. Now, when you are done with that, then you will now want to write your limitation section. So what is the limitation of this your study? And then you end with the conclusion section. So I'll talk about that next. But what I've explained here is how to discuss each of the points. So each of the points that you highlighted from your results, you want to compare it with literature, agreements, differences. Then you want to kind of expound on it. What's the significance? What does this mean? And then you want to discuss it further on what the implication of that your finding will be. So, so these 3 steps, so this 1, 2, 3 for each of the points. So remember, paragraph 1, you've done your general overview. So paragraph 2, you're discussing one topic. So you do 1, 2, 3 over that single topic. You move to the next topic, you do 1, 2, 3. You move to the next topic, you do 1, 2, 3. Now, when you are done with that, so you have paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4 now. Then your next paragraph, you want to acknowledge your limitation. And you also, the next paragraph, you want to end with a conclusion. So depending on how many of those points you want to discuss. So I believe this is clear. If you have any questions, just hold on and then I'll take that at the end as well. So now let's discuss how to write the limitation section. So how to write the limitation section for your study. It is, if your study is well planned, you would have anticipated some limitations and you would have done some things to mitigate against that. So, but then sometimes there's really nothing you could do. And even though you will have taken some steps to minimize the effect of that limitation, so you will mention it to say, this is a likely limitation at the beginning. This is what we've done to minimize it, even though that limitation is still there. And you want to sometimes explain how that limitation affects the generalizability of your results. How much of a conclusion can you make? So, for instance, that's caffeine and medical student study. If you notice that maybe 400, 500, and 600 levels, so 40, 50, and 60 class did not really participate much who are in the clinicals. So by the time you want to generalize and say in Kogi medical student, coffee intake affects academic performance, you will want to generalize with caution because you noted that because the clinical students were on rotation, they were unable to participate in the study. So even you wouldn't want to easily conclude that way. That's the limitation of your study. So I believe you're following me. And then finally, you want to, suggest how future studies can either address those limitations or what future study can do better anyway, you can suggest. So for instance, you could say future study could go to ensure they include clinical students, maybe by actually taking the surveys to their postings and whatever, so that they can include them. So, and that will make for a more generalizable result. So it is better and appropriate thing to do to really be honest and transparent even while you are putting out your thoughts in this way. So finally, at the tail end of your discussion is the conclusion. Now, in your conclusion, you don't want to overstate your results again. Now, in your conclusion, what you want to achieve with your conclusion is you want to link your conclusion, you ensure that it is actually well linked to your research question, your research objectives, the aim of your study. So, because if I want to like quickly scan through your study, I want to look at your research question and I want to look at your conclusion. Did you answer that your research question, and what did you find? So you want to summarize maybe your key findings in relation to your research objectives, and then you might want to highlight the significance of that your finding for the for the scientific community generally, of for the the stakeholders that of importance as far as that study is concerned. You want to avoid generalization or overgeneralization. If you've done a study in Kogi, just as I've said, you don't want to say for medical students in Nigeria, because it's not like all medical students in Nigeria partook in that study. So you want to be careful. Yeah. And sometimes you might want to provide recommendations or future directions for studies. So generally, additional tips for how to write, I would say ensure that what you're discussing is what you found. Try and limit the major thing that you're going to write on to between 3 to 5. You don't have to write on all your finding. You don't want to introduce new results that you did not mention in the results section into your discussion, and you want to avoid overgeneralization. So don't make absolute claims. You have to be cautious about how you conclude. And another thing is, it's perfectly okay to really get someone who is more senior to get their thoughts on your paper, because because of their experience, they also be able to look into what you're discussing to actually add very sound thoughts and insights to whatever you are writing. So it's nice to get their feedback with your mentors. Get your peers to also review it and proofread it for you. And it is generally okay to write that way, because if you write really well, your result is going to be, and your work is going to be impactful. So at this point, I will stop to probably take any question, and then I will, so I'll stop sharing, and then I'll come back to conclude. Okay. All right. So thoughts and questions now before, or if you have any comments. If you have any question, please just raise your hand. Or if you drop any question in the chat. Does anybody have any question, or I can conclude? I still want to show you the study. Excellent. Whiskey. Yeah, please go ahead and ask a question.
Good morning, and thank you
Hi.
the amazing session, Dr. King Chris. Please, I just have a question, because one of the speakers that we had on the bootcamp program really emphasized the discussion part, and then sometimes, like, it depends a lot on the writer's, would I say, skill and experience. So what are some tips that you have for new writers? Because the discussion part has a lot to do with your intellectual, would I say, investment into the projects. Like, you can do a very good project, but you wouldn't write it well. So do you have any specific writing tips for people who have not done this before, like myself, on how to best pass our ideas in writing? Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question, really, Whiskey. So one of the, I didn't want to lead with talking about AI, and it's something that I'm going to mention to you guys, how it can support your writing. It's better to really get the foundation solid. One of the things that you want to aim for is to be clear. Try to be clear. You can make your point clear. Don't try to be complex. Don't try to add a lot of vocabularies that and sound really smart. Try to be clear. You can take it from there. Now, the tips to writing is to write. You will not become an expert in writing one day. So if I if I show you the first paper that I wrote, the discussion, I was laughing at myself. So so you write and keep writing and keep getting better. So as you're writing and you're getting people to review your work and you're getting feedback, you actually be getting better as you're writing. So don't stop at the first one that you've written. So continue writing, you'll be getting better. So, and if the first one is not as great, the second one will be better. But also try to get mentors to look at what you have written. They can help you to, say, oh, instead of putting it this way, why don't you write this way? So those are some tips. The other thing I will mention, which I think I've mentioned, maybe emphasize a bit, is look at your result. You don't have to present everything in your result. What are the major things that you want to discuss? So sometimes you need a mentor to also guide you through that, to actually say, these are like the really important things, and you can discuss it. But don't go ahead bringing out 10 things from your result and start discussing them one by one. So how do you piece them together? These are the major things that I'm going to discuss, 3 to 5 really, and bring them out. So then finally, AI. There are a lot of AI support for writing now. Initially, I used to be a proofreader. So maybe like 5-6 years back, I was proofreading for one company in India. So they had they will collect like manuscript from like people that English is not their first language, and maybe Chinese and Korean and all of that, and they help them to perfect it in English. So, and that's what I was doing in days of the AI had not blown up then. And so that really helped me to know how to write. But now, those people, that kind of company is not that great anymore. It's not that profitable as it used to be, because AI has those Chinese and those non-English speaking guys now, they just put the work into AI and the AI will help them. So you can make your thoughts and then put it into AI for AI to help you refine it in terms of the writing. But that doesn't mean that you leave the work of your writing to AI. So if you are able to pass your thought across and now say, there are different prompts, and I can guide people on that. You can say, please help me fashion this into a very clear and British English, if that is what you're using, American English. You can do all of that. That's also what people are doing now. So whether it's ChatGPT, Meta, is it DeepSeek, and Grok, you can use that as well. Okay. Did I answer your question, Whiskey? Excellent.
Yeah,
I
thank you,
think
sir.
great. I think Tolu and me or someone also have. Who is the person that I can't see any hand up here, but I think someone has a question as well. Okay. So if there is no any other question, so let me show you. So this same paper that I've been using to show example to you. Let me use the same paper to show you how a result section is written. Okay. So if you're with me, remember this paper that we did on the research opportunities and barrier for medical students in Nigeria. If you can you see my screen? Yeah, okay, great. Now, so remember that this paper, the aim of this paper was to, let me see, the aim is somewhere here. Yeah, this study aimed to examine the level of research engagement among medical students, identify the available opportunity, explore the barriers that hinders participation. So that is the aim of this study, and gather recommendation from recent graduates on the way to enhance involvement among medical students. So, and I remember that so we did like, we sample across the geopolitical zones. Now see how we written the method. So presented the result here, And yeah, so this is how we've written the discussion. So you can see that the first, I think this is the first paragraph. So you can see that the first paragraph of this discussion is like a general, it discuss the results generally. This discuss the results generally. So, we just talk about research participation. And after that, I think this is the first paragraph ending here. I don't know how this thing is formatted. It's looking funny here. Maybe I should download the PDF. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. This might be better. Super. All right. Okay. Yep. Result. Discussion. Where is it? Yeah, this is it. Yeah. Okay. I think they just put the tables in between, even the discussion. Anyway, yeah. So this is the discussion. So we can see that the first point that we made was very general. Then we'll now start picking the things one by one to discuss them. So the first was on research participation, and we're given literature to actually explain each of them. So we explain how this impact of low research exposure may be far-reaching on health system. So we are explaining implication, which I told the people. Which I expect that you first you compare, you elaborate, and you mention what's the implication of this, which remember I mentioned. Then so we talk about the impact on the health system generally, and we discuss what that could mean in terms of implication. Now, what are the barriers? So you see, we start discussing barrier here. Inadequate time dedicated to research within Nigerian medical school curriculum, lack of access to funding and or grant, and insufficient requisite skill or training are the major barriers. So now this paragraph is discussing barriers. So you see, medical students in Nigeria face demanding academic schedule. So we're elaborating on those barriers because other studies have talked about some of those barriers. This lack of dedicated time has been highlighted in other studies. So we'll mention that and give reference to those studies and specifically discourage engagement in longitudinal complex studies. In contrast, medical students in high-income countries have dedicated years for research and can often take elective time off to focus. So we are comparing. So you see now this is comparison. So we start with really stating the result, elaborating it, and then we're comparing, which is what I mentioned. Then balancing the responsibilities, leave little time for extracurricular research. We're still kind of comparing and mentioning what this implication of this means. Another significant barrier is lack of access to grants. So we're still talking about barrier. So all this talk about barrier. Then let me see, move to another one. And then another barrier. Now this is another topic here. Another key concern regarding research opportunities for medical students in Nigeria is limited access to conference presentation. While inequitable access to conference is a common challenge across LMIC, it may be particularly pronounced for Nigeria. For Nigerian medical students, due to barriers such as limited access to information, restricted networking opportunity, inadequate funding, and the constraint of a demanding curriculum. So explaining that within the context, bringing out the point. So now we've discussed all of that, discuss the next point. Then after that, I want to show you, we'll move to limitation. So this is the limitation. Now, so several limitations have been noted in this study. The use of purposive sampling to ensure diverse representation across Nigerian geopolitical zone and institutional type may not fully reflect the experience of all Nigerian medical students. We are saying this on the generalizability because since we chose schools, we have to be careful with how we generalize. So that is a point there. And then we mentioned something that future studies could do. You can recommend what. So we also acknowledge the possibility of a recall bias from relying on retrospective recollection, blah, blah, blah. richer insights could have been gained through focus group discussion or individuals in depth. So now we are giving thoughts to what could be done better next time. So despite this challenge, the study provide a foundation and all of that. So we state the limitation, what we did to actually make it better, what could be done better next time. So, and all of that. Then now look at the conclusion. In conclusion, while Nigerian medical students face significant challenges in research participation, structural changes such as curriculum integration and improved mentorship can foster a more supportive research environment for research engagement. In addition, national policy addressing regional and gender disparities and leveraging digital resources and international collaboration can help bridge this gap, facilitating greater research involvement among medical students in Nigeria. So you can see we are mentioning some of the really very vital findings from this, and also the recommendations as well, which I said you want to ensure that in your conclusion, you are answering your research question, you stating your major findings, and if you have any recommendations, you want to mention it there. So this is how to write a discussion section. So if anyone have any other question, I'll take it at this point. Otherwise, we'll end it here. So what you can do is to go and look for maybe manuscripts that have been published in some of the very good journals. So, and see how the result sections are written. So that will help you. Just look at it. Look at the flow of what I've told you today. The format, the pattern, and the tips that I've shared with you today. You can look at that. All right. Is there anything else? If there's nothing else, I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll... Oh, excellent. There's one question. Elishama, do you want to ask a question? Or that is a mistake? Okay, I think that might be a mistake. All right. Okay, so thank you everyone and enjoy your